Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. Well, it's good to be alive and well in 2026, and we are grateful and appreciative to God who sustained us through 2025, from the beginning of the year to the end of it. And now another 365-day journey begins in 2026. We pray God for the grace to maximize the opportunities there. And of course, here on Business Morning, and of Business Incorporated, I must add, and Channels Television generally, we're here to help you maximize the time that we have here in 2026. Beginning from today, the first full week, working week that is, in 2026. I'm Ini John Mekwa, and I'm glad to always do 55 minutes of current and relevant business conversations with you here in Business Morning. And well, the pattern hasn't changed, even though the year has changed. We're starting from what's going on in the global oil space, where we see prices drifted lower on Monday as adequate global supplies offset concerns about supply disruptions after the United States captured Venezuelan president in an audacious raid over the weekend. Brent futures we see for this morning is down in the red 0.63%. The price is $60.37, and WTI is also down 0.7% at $56.92 a barrel. And as Ladi noted on Friday, we see oil at the beginning of 2025 also recording some high numbers, but somewhere towards the end of the year it kind of slumps because of different factors. For now, chief of that is that President Donald Trump says that the U.S. would take control of oil-producing nation, that's Venezuela, and that the U.S. embargo on all Venezuelan oil remained in full effect after detaining the president, Maduro, in New York on Sunday. In a global market with plentiful oil supply, analysts are saying that any further disruption to Venezuelans' export would have little immediate impact on prices. And then we come to our market, which was the fifth best performing globally in 2025, closed on a new high at the end of the year, and we saw it go to 156,492.36, almost 2% at the close of trade last week, 1.92%, and the cap there getting really close to 100 trillion naira. Of course, we haven't seen the equities markets in Nigeria hit 100 trillion naira, so hopefully we can start this full trading week with 100 trillion naira, a new high. More money for you as an investor in the market. So we saw the volume for the week, that's last week. The volume was the only one in the red, but value and deals were green. You know, last week was one day short in all of the trades. For the sectors, banking looked good, 2.96 up. Consumer also even better, 3.44%. Industrial goods 0.82, insurance 5.93, and oil and gas 1.16. Now, this year, we know that a lot of recap that started last year would be concluded this year. For instance, for the banking, it's supposed to be concluded by March. And then later on in the year, I think about June or July or so, can't remember for sure now, insurance recap. So we expect these activities to draw a lot of attention and attraction to the sectors, that's banking and insurance for sure. And then, of course, we know that last year, industrial goods did really well, even though insurance, because of NIRA and some of those reforms, did best. It was the best performing last year. That's talking about insurance. But this year, we would see a lot of attention on banking and insurance. And of course, depending on the spending of the federal government or even the state's government, we'll see what happens with industrial goods. Consumer goods is always to sell. Everybody has to eat. We have to survive. So consumer goods. So just in case you're looking for where to invest in this January so that you can follow your money and see how it works for you, I mean, those are some of the sectors that you might want to pay attention to as we begin 2026. Top gainers for last week, however, were Austin Labs and Company, Aluminium Extrusion, and Unicel. Or top losers, E-Transact, First Holdco PLC, and Living Trust. And we know that First Holdco had a bounce towards the end of the year after that announcement that they met the recap. So I guess profit taken after that took place, and then we saw a drop 7.92%. Top trades were Cornerstone Insurance, Charm Holding, and Access Holdings at the close of trade last week. Well, talking about corporates now, Fidelity Bank PLC has announced the completion of the tenure of its board chairman, Mr. Mustafa Chike Obi, and the appointment of a new chairperson, Mrs. Amaka Ogungalu. And this was contained in a notice signed by the company's secretary, Ezinwa Unugboje, and sent to the Nigerian Exchange Limited. According to the notice, Chike Obi, a non-executive director, stepped down on December 31, 2025, after leading the bank through significant growth across key financial metrics. The bank praised his contributions to strategic achievements and long-term development during his tenure. And another corporate here now, a company that we are very used to here on Business Morning, investment management firm, AfriInvest. They've announced the rebranding of their digital investment platform, Optimus by AfriInvest, to Plutus New by AfriInvest. The rebranding is described as the next phase of the firm's digital strategy, focused on expanding access to wealth creation. And speaking on the rebrand, the managing director of Plutus New by AfriInvest, Dr. Ayode Jebo, said that the change positions the platform for long-term growth. And we know Dr. Ebo is a regular guest here on Business Morning. The chairman of the Lagos State Councillor Forum, Honorable Olakule Williams, is asking Nigeria's governors forum and the conference of speakers of Lagos State legislatures to take concrete steps to ensure that the Supreme Court's ruling on local government autonomy is fully implemented. He was speaking exclusively to Channels Television. Honorable Williams highlights the challenges currently being faced by local governance. He emphasizes that local governments are the primary engines of national development and is asking that until they are fully operational and independent, the vision of a more prosperous Nigeria will remain unattainable.
With all the experience I've gathered, I know that the best thing for this country is to have that local government autonomy for every local government and local council to be responsible for the development of their own people.
True.
Now, for whatever reason this has been delayed or these have been having issues, I think we need to call more on a governor's forum to ensure that, because the truth is the truth, whether we like it or not, won't be in power forever, but the country will always be there. So it is what we do now, ensuring that we have everything works well, at least in an ideal setting. So we need to call on the governor's forum to try and work on this, and conference of State House of Assembly. Now the lawmakers, they need to work on this. They need to ensure that each local government have the autonomy, like what we have in Lagos. You can see development. You can see development that's tried everywhere. Go to Alimosho, go to Bejuleki, go to Agboyiketu, come to Lagos Island, go to Ikeja. You can see just because successive governments, administration in Lagos State have understand that, oh, local government needs to breathe, local government needs to have the autonomy. So the truth be told, we don't get local government. It's when I got into local government administration that I realized that if we get local government right, everything will be good.
There's more on that interview to be on tonight on Newsnight by 9 p.m. Today on all Channels television platforms. Now, one of the hottest economic conversations in Nigeria this time, obviously, is the tax reform. Started on Thursday officially, and now the National Assembly, they've released certified true copies showing major differences with gazetted laws. Concerns over the discrepancies between Nigeria's newly gazetted tax reform laws and the versions approved by the parliament have intensified after the National Assembly released those certified true copies of the legislation. The House of Representatives, they did that over the weekend. They published the CTCS of those 4 reform acts signed into law by President Bola Tinubu following public complaints about alleged post-passage alterations and the circulation of unauthorized texts. The acts are the Nigeria Tax Act 2025, the Nigeria Tax Administration Act 2025, the National Revenue Service Establishment Act 2025, and the Joint Revenue Board Establishment Act 2025. House spokesperson Akin Rotimi said the Speaker of the House and Senate President Godswill Akpabio have ordered the release after reports emerged of conflicting versions of the law in circulation. He said lawmakers acted to provide authoritative records of what the legislature approved and transmitted for presidential assent. Still on the tax, the Center for Promotion of Private Enterprise, CPPE, described the ongoing tax reform and ranks it among the most ambitious fiscal restructuring efforts in recent decades. The Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Muda Yusuf, is however concerned that the success or failure of the reform would depend far less on its legislative provisions, but far more on how it is implemented. He suggests that without careful sequencing, political sensitivity, and economic realism, even well-intentioned reforms can trigger resistance, disrupt livelihoods, and further erode public trust. Dr. Yusuf notes that the policy flashpoints that's fueling anxiety, such as the mandatory reporting of quarterly bank transactions of 25 million and above to the tax authority, as well as the capital gains tax, was going from 10% to 30%, despite assurances around thresholds. And sharing these in a statement, CPP also says that the 500,000 naira annual rent relief cap is misaligned with prevailing urban housing costs and risks further squeezing middle-class disposable income. Concerns are further heightened by the wide enforcement powers granted to tax authorities and the severity of penalties and sanctions embedded in the tax laws. We'll discuss some of this, obviously, this week and going forward as the tax law come into effect. But first of all, let's see it from the perspective of a former FIRS, now NRS. We have the Deputy Director, Competent Authority Department of the Nigeria Revenue Service, Mr. Kehinde Kajeshomo. He's joining us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Kajeshomo, you're welcome to the program. Happy New Year.
Good morning. Happy New Year to you also, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, but
it's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you here. I must say, this period is expected to be a very busy one for you. First of all, let's start with your name. So you've gone from FIRS to NRS, Nigeria Revenue Service. What other difference can we expect with this change of name?
Yeah, thank you. Starting from the change of name, the change of name is to properly reflect who we are and what we do. Who we are and what we do, we have a revenue agency of Nigeria. And what do? We collect revenue for the Federation of Nigeria. So it's erroneous to think that we are just an agency of the federal government, because in fact, more than 95% of revenue we collect or we generate are for the federation. That is, they are meant to be shared by the 3 tiers of government. So our service to the federal government is less than actually 5%. We only collect personal income tax for federal government in respect of armed forces, police, and non-resident. So basically, we serve Nigeria, the Federation of Nigeria. So that change of name is to properly reflect who we are. And what has changed in what we do, we now have a Nigerian Revenue Service that have improved or increased mandate to ensure that they properly collect revenue that is due to the Federation. They have oversight function on revenue collection of the federal government. I mean, they ensure that all the revenue due to the Federation comes in, properly assessed, collected, and accounted for. So in change, nothing much has changed. We are still performing the same function. However, we have a broader scope to ensure that we are able to provide or help the government to get appropriate revenue to fund its activities. Thank you.
And now you also have the Joint Revenue Board, also supposed to be coordinating body for tax administration. How do you work together so there's no clash?
Thank you. Both have different functions, actually. While for the Nigerian Revenue Service, our function is to administer revenue administration, to assess, to collect the revenue, to account for the revenue. If there's need for to carry out enforcement and all those activities, basically tax administration function. But for the Joint Revenue Board, their function is to ensure coordination of the revenue administrations that we have in Nigeria. You know, Nigeria, we operate federalism in the sense that we have the revenue agency for the Federation, which is the Nigerian Revenue Service, and each state of the Federation also has its revenue agency. So it's important that we ensure that all these revenue agencies, they work together in sync. There's appropriate coordination. For instance, you don't want a situation where, as an individual, Lagos State is asking me to pay tax, FCT is asking me to pay tax, Sokoto State is asking me to pay tax. Who do I pay tax to? How do I ensure that I'm not paying multiple taxation? And that is where Joint Revenue Board comes in to ensure, yes, the law is there to ensure that we don't have such anomaly. And the responsibility of JRB now is to coordinate those revenue agencies to ensure that those jurisdictions that have been set in the law are respected. And of course, they also work together. For instance, in the area of exchange of information, in the area of providing assistance together to each other, that's the revenue agency, how to support each other. The JRB will come in that respect and provide such framework that will enable those revenue agencies to work together in the areas that have been identified in the law for them to cooperate and work together.
Okay, so we know that at the end of the day, the states have a major role to play. I know that Mr. Oyedele had told us that, there's a harmonization effort going on to domesticate the law, into the states. So with you, the Joint Revenue Board, the NRS, where are the states? Where are your state arms, and how are you going to coordinate all of that?
Thank you. Under the JRB, each of those revenue agencies actually make up the JRB. So the head of agencies are actually board members of the JRB. So the expectation is that they, under the JRB, we work together. For instance, and of course, they have started working together in the area of tin harmonization. Now, the tin tax ID, tax identification has been harmonized. What you only need to do now is to put if you are an individual, you put your name in the portal. If you are a corporate individual, a corporate person, you put your RC number or even your present thing in the portal, and your harmonized thing will be generated for you. And those are the things that the agencies are doing together, working together. And in other areas where the Nigerian Revenue Service need to provide support to the state agencies, of course, the Nigerian Revenue Service is going to do that. But we are going to do that under the auspices of the Joint Revenue Board.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that. But I also like for you to give us more information because, of course, I know you heard about the frenzy when it was announced that everybody must have a TIN, tax identification number. But now, I believe there's a website that individuals can put in their NIN and get a TIN out of it. Could you help us explain? And perhaps if you know that website, you could mention it for people, for our viewers.
Yeah. So the explanation is very simple. So as I said earlier, what the website is for, and I think we need to come from where we were before. Let's make it clear that having tax ID is not new. The previous law actually make it compulsory for every person to have a tax identification number. For instance, if you go to Section 10 of the old CITA, Company Income Tax Act, it mandates every bank to ensure that they obtain tax identification number before opening an account and specify penalty for not doing that. We also have similar provision in the Personal Income Tax Act that went into extinction. So the requirement for TIN is not new. So the fact that we have a new law, what is in the previous law needed to be codified into the new law. So that is why we are having such requirement under the new act. It has always been a requirement under the law for every person to have a tax ID or tax identification number. So nothing has changed. Now, if you have a TIN already, you have a tax ID already, or you have a NIN, you don't know whether you have a tax ID and you need to generate your tax ID. Now a portal has been created. Of course, I don't have the portal link here, but that portal, if you put, I've tried it. I've put my NIN in that portal and it has generated for me, or it has brought forward, because it's not a new generation, because I've been paying my taxes before. So what that portal will do is to search through the database and locate your tax ID and bring it out for you to see. So we are not actually generating a new taxpayer identification. What the portal is meant to do is to retrieve your taxpayer identification number that is already in the database of the revenue authorities. And what the portal also does is, for those that have multiple identification, because it's possible that when you're in Lagos, you have a tax ID, you have moved to FCT, you created another tax identification. The portal will also harmonize those identifications so that when it is bringing out a tax ID for you, it's not going to bring a multiple tax ID, but we bring the ID that is applicable to you. Because that's one of the key objectives of the reform, to ensure that we don't have duplicated IDs, that the revenue agencies harmonize their practices, harmonize their activities. So that is what the portal has tried to do, to ensure that those identifications are harmonized and you're able to retrieve just one for the purpose of your tax compliance.
When we talk about data harmonization or harmonizing, that will sound good to a lot of Nigerians, because we've been complaining about duplicating of our data. You go to the FIRS, you have one. You go to the FRSC, you have one. You go to your bank account, you have one. But also help us to understand those everybody who has a bank account is supposed to have a TIN. Is a NIN, when you go to this portal, even if I did not have a tax ID before now, can I put in my NIN and get a tax ID? And how does it affect my operations with my bank account?
Okay, thank you. Most Nigerians actually have tax ID. They may not have consciously asked for it, but I remember when I opened, when I registered for national identification number with NIMSI, I'm aware that an SMS was sent to me from FCTRS to inform me that an ID, a tax ID, which we used to call TIN, has been generated for me. So actually, most Nigerians that have already registered and obtained NIN actually have tax ID. It's just that they may not have it readily available. So, as I said, what the portal does is, when you put your NIN, what the portal does is to go into the database and fetch out the tax ID that is already in the system and bring it out for you. And of course, subsequently, when people register for NIN, the database is going to be able to automatically also generate your tax ID and also bring it forward for you. So it's not a new process of I want to go and register for tax ID. It's a process that we already have in place, even since we started the registration for NIN. So it's just for you now to retrieve that number by going to the portal that have been created, put your NIN, and that ID will be generated for you. And of course, for those that subsequently register with NIMC and get their NIN, that will also be generated and they can retrieve it from the portal. Now, how does that relate with banks? So this is also to give comfort to the banks that we don't have an issue where your customers will be running around looking for TIN or going to queue for TIN to be generated for them. As I said, we already have a TIN. Most of us have TIN available on the portal. So what you only need to do is, as a bank, is to encourage your taxpayer, your customer, to log on to that portal, generate their, retrieve their TIN and or tax ID, and use it to modify or update their accounts. So I think that's the process. Okay. And for banks, of course, as I said, the obligation is not new. Most bankers will tell you that this has been an obligation since 2019 Finance Act, 2019 Finance Act, when the law mandated banks to ensure that they collect TIN from taxpayer when they are opening an account. It didn't just stop there. That law then did not just stop at you collecting TIN when you are just opening an account. It mandates them to also update that customer accounts in respect of existing customers. So we already have a law since 2019 that require banks to, number one, when you are opening a new account, generate, include the tax ID. And if it's not a new account, update the existing account to reflect their tax ID. Thank you.
All right. Oh, thank you for that clarification. Now, the alteration controversy that has been going on, now we've seen the lawmakers release what they say is what they sent to the president for assent. I wonder what the views and the perspective of the NRS is concerning the issue of the alteration.
Yeah, thank you. A good question that I think does not really concern NRS. And I think my executive chairman was on air yesterday to clarify all this. That's the executive chairman of NRS. When we talk of tax system, when we talk of a nation, there's what we call a tax system. And that tax system is divided into three parts, which we call the three legs of tax system. The one is policy. The second one is legislation, and the third one is administration. So policy has designed, and policy resides with the Minister of Finance, which is also represented or assisted by the Presidential Committee. They have designed the policies, the tax policies, which they have submitted to the National Assembly. And the National Assembly, based on the policy that was submitted to them, took the one they like, reject the one they don't, and have approved or passed a law. And after the law is passed, of course, we are all aware the process they went through. They went through rigorous process, public hearing, and so on and so forth. And the process of our lawmaking required that when they finish, of course, the finishing include them harmonizing with both the House of Rep and the Senate. Them harmonizing, and when they harmonize, they submit what they have to the president, who sign and return it to them to publish or to gazette. So our understanding is that this process has been followed by the National Assembly. So at this point, it doesn't come to the Nigerian Revenue Service. Where the Nigerian Revenue Service comes in is when that law has been gazetted. The Nigerian Revenue Service and other revenue agencies, which comes under tax administration, the leg I spoke about, the last leg, which is tax administration. The revenue agencies now use the law that has been gazetted to administer taxes. So for us in the Nigerian Revenue Service, what we are interested in is what has been gazetted for us to implement. And if at any point, maybe the legislators think or feel maybe wrong provision or wrong version has been gazetted, it still goes back to the legislators to do their finding, and if they find it true, they gazette what they think is the correct one. But for Nigerian Revenue Service, we implement what is gazetted. So that is the process of lawmaking and process of tax administration. The Nigerian Revenue Service, all these issues going on, for me, does not concern the Nigerian Revenue Service. And as of today, our understanding is that what has been gazetted represents what has been passed, because we don't even have the vote and proceeding of the legislators. It's the vote and proceeding, what we call vote and proceeding, which is the record of transaction, the process in approving a bill. I mean, how a bill is passed in the House and in the Senate. They call it vote and proceeding. They are records of the Assembly, not the record of Nigerian Revenue Service or any other person. So it's left for the legislators to look at their vote and proceeding against what has been gazetted, because the gazetting is also done by the clerk of the Assembly. So to check their vote and proceeding and compare it what has been gazetted and do their investigation, do their finding, and take appropriate action. But for revenue agencies, when there's a gazetted law, the revenue agencies implement that gazetted law. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. And we do hope it's a gazetted law that's in circulation, because, I mean, that's where the controversy started from, when some people noted that was in circulation is different from what was gazetted. But, I mean, as you said, the NRRS has the duty to work with the gazetted law. Now, there are other concerns that I would like for you to react to. And these ones are coming from the Center for Promotion of Private Enterprises, Dr. Muda Yusuf. I know you would have heard of him, or you know him personally. So first of all, he says it's not that the reform is bad. He says it's ambitious. And then he notes that, of course, the success of it will depend on the implementation. No matter how fine or beautiful the law looks or sounds like, the implementation, however, is what would determine its success. Then he's also bringing in the need for careful sequencing of this reform. That's one thing he's asking for, so that it doesn't trigger resistance and disrupt livelihoods. And then he brings also the mandatory reporting of quarterly bank transactions of 25 million and above. But he also notes, which is where I think really concerns the NRS, that it seems that the tax authorities are going to be overpowered or have too much power, with the new law. Could you react to some of these issues, please?
Yeah, thank you. Number one, I agree with him that implementation is key. No matter how beautiful provisions of a law is, if it's poorly implemented, then people will not get benefit of that law. So at the Nigerian Revenue Service, I think we are equal to the tax and we are prepared to implement the law. Then the second is the issue of sequencing.
Yes.
Yes, this issue of the sequencing. Don't forget, what is in this bill? I mean, these laws. People have come with so many narratives. But what is the actual narrative in the bill, in the laws? We have provisions in the law that is to the benefit of the public. So are we saying the provision that says if your income is up to it's not more than about 1.2 million per annum, that's and the law says you should not pay tax, or you pay tax at 0 rate. Are we saying we should sequence that? We shouldn't implement immediately? We have provision on small businesses. Should we sequence that and not implement immediately? We have provision that says that allow companies to claim inputs of VAT over their output. Are we expecting to sequence that? So when we are talking of sequence, what are we talking about? What do we mean by sequencing? And don't forget, the old laws has been repealed. So there's no provision of the law now you can implement in silos because they work together. Because let's take example, we have the Nigerian Tax Act and we have the Nigerian Tax Administration Act. One imposes tax and one is how to implement that provision, how to implement the tax that have been imposed. So if you are sequencing, do we say let the law that implements tax continue, while the one that says that specifies how that tax will be collected be suspended? So the sequencing for me doesn't work because you can't implement any of those provisions in isolation. They work together. The 4 laws are conjoined. They have to be implemented together. And the same way the provisions. So that is why I find it difficult to understand why the call for sequencing. Then let's go to the last issue on
too much power given to tax authorities.
It's unfortunate that people are not conversant with what we have in our previous laws. So they are actually looking at the provision of the new law without looking at it against what we have in the previous laws. For instance, you've spoken about 25 million threshold reporting. But what was actually in the last law, which is the Federal Revenue Service Establishment Act, that provision was there, Section 28. Section 28 actually required banks to file returns of 10 million for individual and 25 million for corporates. That means now, if you have 10 million transaction before, your returns will be filed. But now, if you have 10 million, it will not be filed because the new rule says 25 million. So this new rule is actually a reprieve. The new law is actually a reprieve because before you file returns at 10 million, but now you have to wait till it's 25 million, and if it's not up to 25 million, you don't file the returns. The same thing for corporate companies. Before, it was 25 million under Section 28 of FRS Establishment Act, but now it is 100 million. That means if it was before, if your turnover is, your transaction for the quarter is 80 million, your returns get filed, but now if your transaction is 80 million, your return will not be filed until you clock the 100 million. So there is, in fact, from what I've just said, the power was actually reduced, not increased. So I've not seen where the power of the Federal Revenue Service has been increased in proportion to what was in the previous law. And if you are talking of power to distrain, I also hear people talking about power to distrain. It's what's in the old law. In fact, most of the power we talk about was in the old law. What was simply done was to move them from the Federal Revenue Service Establishment Act to the Nigerian Tax Administration Act, so that we separate establishment rule from enforcement. That's number one. So then number two, so that all the revenue authorities can have and share similar power, so that what the Nigerian Revenue Service is doing, or the power it has, is different from what a state revenue service is doing and the power it has. And we have had those challenges in the previous law. For instance, we've had situations where some banks complain that their branches in some states have been locked up, and all those issues. So what we now have now is to remove the power that the Nigerian Revenue Service has from its own Establishment Act and move it to the Nigerian Tax Administration Act, so that all the revenue authorities can have similar power and operate taxation in a similar way. No extra power has been given to the Nigerian Revenue Service. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for taking your time to explain all of that. We do appreciate your time. Mr. Kehinde Kajeshomo, the Deputy Director, Competent Authority Department at the Nigeria Revenue Service.
Thank you.
All right, let's take a break now. When we come back, we're looking at the broader economy with the Managing Consultant and Chief Executive Officer of Flame Academy and Consultant Limited. That'll be after this break. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Watching Business Morning right here on Channels Television Hub. Joining us virtually now from Nnewi, Anambra State, the Managing Consultant and Chief Executive Officer of Flame Academy and Consulting Limited. He's also a chartered banker and a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, Mr. Oji Udemezue. Mr. Udemezue, Happy New Year, and we look forward to a better 2026 than 2025.
Happy New Year, and thanks so much for having me in this program. It's a great year. We're looking forward to both at micro and macro level.
Sure.
God helping us.
Exactly. But you know, and I'm happy that you said that, because we had a lot of wins following data and even people's perspective in 2025, but they were at the macro level. I think the one that was really big was towards the end of the year. We saw the FDI for 2025 was up about 700% compared to the quarter before that. So a big one to celebrate. But of course, when we look closer, we also see that our multidimensional poverty index increased, even in the same year. So I hope, or we're looking forward to that, 2026 will be focused on moving those macro benefits and gains to the micro. But I wonder how we can do that fast, because this is a pre-election year, another distraction.
All right, so that's a very important point you've brought up here. When an economy seems to be doing well in numbers, looking at the data, GDP is edging up, inflation is coming down, and there appears to be a better management of our currency, and all of those parameters, even the trade position is going more towards surplus than deficit, and all the numbers look good. Even revenue is ramping up compared to the past, and all of that. The budget is getting bigger, but at the end of the day, the life of the individual Nigerian is getting worse and worse, less progressive and less enjoyable. So you find that, in economics, you say that the growth you are seeing in the economy is not inclusive, and growth here is not being transformed into development, because in economic theory, economic growth has now been separated from economic development. You can see an economy growing in numbers. The real GDP per capita might be getting bigger. In a way, you could say that the average citizen is earning bigger than previously. But that's just numbers. Looking at inequity, the inequitability of the economic system, you find that while those numbers are growing, many individuals are still moving into poverty, because the growth is not being managed to include everybody and to translate into better education, better quality of life, freedom of speech, better security of life and property, and other things that can say that we are living a better life. life expectancy, and other human development indices. So Nigeria has a lot of work to do there. And what is the fundamental issue here? The way the economy is managed. When you have a very efficient, selfless, and proper management of an economy, you will see the economic data and growth being well transformed into development. That's the major challenge we have in Nigeria. And as time goes on, I can throw more light on this.
Please do throw more light, Mr. Demese, because we're looking for a fast-track way of getting these benefits to the people, to the welfare of the people. I mean, that seems to be what remains, and sustaining the trajectory that we started in 2025.
All right, okay, so without mincing words here, and with little concern about whose horse is God or whose shoes I step on, Nigerian political system needs to do a lot better to see how we can transform our economic numbers to a better welfare, a better standard of living for the basic Nigeria. If you see an economy where the wealth of the nation, the bulk of it, is being spent by the bourgeois, those who have been lucky to find themselves in the political corridor, where billions of money is being spent to maintain assets held by the National Assembly, the executive arm of government, and so on. So much money is being spent in allowances and salaries of few individuals. Some analysis was saying that the amount of money we spend on legislators, as few as they are, can cover the whole salary of even the professors who should be among the most productive agents of this economy. That disparity is so much. You find an economy where every day you hear billions and billions of dollars and naira in stolen funds. All kinds of, I don't want to call names here, but every other day, both at the commissioner level, at the state government, at the governorship level, EFCC cases up and down, money sounding in billions being wasted at every level of government, local government, state government, appointment level, commissioners, ministers, aides to ministers, and so on. These billions, when you aggregate them, the amount of funds that would have gone into the welfare of the people, funds that would have been used to build standard educational systems, standard health facilities, standard infrastructure, roads, railways, even power, for example. Imagine Nigeria, the giant of Africa, still struggling with 4,000 megawatts of electricity for several decades. And I thought that a major reform in a country like Nigeria at this point will not be worried about electricity anymore. But here we are. We're talking about reform. Tell me any infrastructure that has been built in this country in the past few years and completed. And yet we take on much bigger ones that require trillions of naira. We take them on while the low-hanging fruit have not been captured. How can Nigeria in the 21st century, 2026, be saying that we cannot give an average Nigerian, adequate supply of power to run their lives and economy? So the reforms are not well directed. The reforms are not happening where they're meant to happen. We are driving revenue so much energy, and then little or no energy in driving accountability in the revenue usage. The government of Nigeria, I'm not just accusing this government, the previous government have shut their ears to the need to review how our government is run and how to ensure proper governance and accountability. A major issue. Until you get this right, the more revenue you make, the more hemorrhage, the more bleeding you have, and we can't achieve any success. That is the ugly truth, and I'm sorry to go that way.
All right, Mr. Demese, thank you for going that way. I mean, it's your opinion, and thank you for sharing it. But please, just briefly now, being a pre-election year, how much disruption should Nigerians expect, in the attention that will be given to the economy? Because, I mean, you talked a lot about politicians. We know that with elections come money spending, come campaigns, traveling, strategizing. How much disruption do you expect, in this year?
Typically in Nigeria, by this time already, even from last year, so much energy and attention is usually placed on the next election. In fact, Even as people are being sworn in their first tenure, the next game is second tenure. It is that bad. The only reason, I will tell you my own view, why Nigeria appears to have slowed down a bit to look inwards on how to improve security in the parts of this country, to even look at economic issues of how do we put the right people at the right places, how do we make the life of Nigerians better, is because we now have some external pressure coming basically from the United States of America, asking questions, why are people being killed so badly in our country? Whether they are Christians, or they are Muslims, or they are atheists, or whoever, but why are the killings going on? And that question has a bit, tapered the tempo of politics in the country. Ordinarily, by now, 2 years away from election, Nigerian government system has shut down governance and focusing on how to win the next cycle of election, which is a very big pity for national. So why are we asking the question, why is the economic growth not giving rise to better lives in Nigeria? We know the answers. People are too concerned, too selfish about getting power that they forget the essence of that power. The whole idea of the electoral process is to carefully, and inclusively and transparently select or elect, appoint people who will lead our economy. And I always say, from my own understanding, that when you have a bad political system, you can't have a good economy. So we should stop deceiving ourselves. As long as people are too deep into power play, by all means, by whatever means to grab the power, it doesn't matter. Even when you are killing people, for whom you are, going to govern, at the end of the day, you can have a better economy. So in Nigeria this year, we're going to have, despite the fact that we have external pressure to look inward and make our country livable and habitable, you will still see a lot of wrangling, political wranglings up and about. It's already happening. It's only veiled by the point I mentioned earlier, the security hot point that we're trying to deal with. But this year, we will see a major shift away from economic governance, to political dominance. He's trying to gain power or influence over the other, some trying to destroy other parties so they come out alone. That's what people are busy doing right now.
All right, Mr. Demese.
Africa's major base of development.
All right, Mr. Demese, thank you so much for sharing that with us this morning. Managing Consultant and Chief Executive Officer of Flame Academy and Consulting Limited. Also, he's a chartered banker and fellow of Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. Mr. Oji Demese, thank you so much for that. All right,
thanks for having me. Have a great year ahead.
Wish you the same, Mr. Demese. Yeah, well, it's time to go, but we have to tell you some of those expectations for this week. And we're expecting from the United States, U.S. factory orders will be out this week. The Institute of Supply Management will be sharing also the manufacturing index for December is expected to be at 48.3%. South Africa mining production update will also be shared. That's on Monday. On Wednesday, job openings for November is expected, as obviously from the United States, and then the U.S. preliminary consumer sentiment would also be out this week. Those are some of the expectations for the week. All right, so that's it on the program. I'll see you at 1:30. Nigeria's equity market is starting strong. We hope to stay strong. I'll give you the update during Business Incorporated. I'm John McCall. I'll talk to you later.